All right, so thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. For those of you who don't know, I'm Taylor Cardillo and I'm the co-chair of the Intellectual Freedom Committee. Also here on the call, we have Amanda Eisenstark, who is my lovely other co-chair. So thank you on behalf of RILA and the Intellectual Freedom Committee. We wanted to give a warm welcome to our presenter today, Martin Garner. Martin is director of the Amherst College Library and was editor of the 10th edition of the Intellectual Freedom Manual. And today he will be presenting the importance of policies promoting our principles in practice, which will address best practices for library policies that support us in promoting intellectual freedom and social justice. So without further ado, Martin, take it away.
Taylor, thanks for that introduction, and Taylor and Amanda, thank you for the invitation. I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to see we have some folks joining us this afternoon. You should hopefully already be seeing my screen that's got the regulation purple and white Amherst College colors on there, and so we can get started. What to expect? Want to find out why you're here, want to talk about the importance of policies, and go over what the 6 key policies are that we think you should have from an intellectual freedom standpoint. And we're going to spend today's focus is really going to be on collection development and reconsideration policies as the main thrust, because it's something that is so important when it comes to challenges. Talk a little bit about the policy resources that are available to you. And this is the first part of a 2-part series. And so if you're going to be taking part in number 2, we're going to talk about the homework. All right, so first of all, why are you here? I want to know what's on your mind. And so because we have a relatively small group, I'm gonna stop sharing for a minute. Oh no, and now our screens are up and you're gonna have to put your cameras on. Oh, the camera just went off, Meredith. You're gonna come back on. Nope, I can see you. And so I'm gonna call on folks and ask you why, like what drove you to spend a late afternoon time talking about policy? Because I know for some, if you like watching paint dry, it might be close to that. Michelle's actually driving somewhere, or she's trying to drive away. This is great. Okay, so I'm going to call on folks, and hopefully, if you don't mind unmuting and talking about why you're here, that'd be great. And Meredith, I am going to start with you.
Hi, thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm here, I'm as the director at East Providence, and we've had challenges to programs and to book displays, and I'm guessing materials down the road. We're also looking at our meeting room policy and all sorts of things that all I'm sure is on the top of everyone's mind. So I'm kind of here for all of it. I feel like I'm at the beginning of getting a handle on all of our policies and realizing that things are a bit outdated, need updating, changing landscape. I'm ready to start working on that and editing with intention and, you know, as a more informed person.
Great, thanks, Matt. Thanks, Meredith. Next in my lineup is Colin.
What Meredith said, but I guess also, you know, it's interesting she mentions policies being outdated, and many of ours are, not just in terms of when they were approved by our Board of Trustees, but they're also reflective of activities that the library was engaged in at that particular time that have changed significantly over time. So, you know, to put it broadly, I think this library has moved from being the kind of warehouse of stuff to being, I hope, more involved in the community, more reflective of community needs above and beyond traditional library services, or what might be termed traditional library services. And those things demand policies of their own or updates to current policies to reflect that current reality.
Thanks, Colin. Michelle, you're next. Are you in a position to talk?
Yes, my husband's actually driving. I am a passenger, so I'm safely in this
Safety
meeting. I think what was just said, I think Meredith hits it right on the head. I am a school librarian, but it's only my second year in this district, and first year didn't have a lot of time to think about policies or even approach the school committee to updating them. But we're definitely in a position to do that, and I need to do that now. So I'm glad that you're doing this. Thank you for your time and your expertise.
Thanks, Michelle. Lisa is next up on my list.
Hi, thanks for having us today. Same as everyone else said, basically. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, same as everyone else. Policies are always so important. My board of trustees uses the Carver method for their policies, and the person who really pushed that for years is going off the board. So I'm interested in seeing if we might adopt a different method for just even the trustee policies, and then anything to do with the library itself. We are, fingers crossed, heading into a renovation in the next few months. And, I think it would be the perfect time for the staff to really sit down and address everything. And as Colin said, a lot of the policies, it's not even the date on them, it's the content. So now's a really good time.
Yeah. Thanks, Lisa. Hi, Julie.
Kind of the same thing everyone is talking about. I've been here in North Situate for 10 years now, just over 10 years, and a vast quantity of our policies predate me. So they are very old in terms of date and content. And I really think with policy writing, we all have really good intentions to always have very current policies and to be looking at them and changing them as needed on a pretty regular basis. And then in reality, we deal with all of our day-to-day stuff, and policies are one of those things that are super easy to just keep saying, oh, I need to do that. And you kick it down the road and, oh, I need to do that. And another year goes by. So here I am with some policies that are over 20 years old that are completely irrelevant and are still on the books and still kicking it down the road. So hopefully this will inspire me to not do that anymore.
Well, and Julie, I just want to let you know you're not alone. Every library I've worked in has had its share of policies that are either ancient or non-existent. Even at Amherst, we don't have a collection development policy. We have a philosophy statement, and it is not good enough. And we are going to be writing one, but we also need to hire a collection development librarian, and we don't want to write the policy without them getting here. But it's also something that's very much on my mind. At my last library, we had to write a new collection development policy because the only one that they could find was on mimeograph. And there was no documentation. So we said it's time to start from scratch. And so this happens, it's a challenge for all of us. So I know Catherine is shepherding their cat right now, and other folks don't have their cameras on. So I hope they're there, but I don't know if Jane or Emily or Kristen or Ken or Cheryl wants to say hello. Cheryl, turn on your camera first. So we'll go to Cheryl and then to Jane.
Hello, I will just say I want to echo what Julie said. Basically, we have a lot of policies. I feel like there's new policies. We've had some push against certain pieces of our policies. So I'm here to learn more about that. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Jane.
Hi there. I have all of the same as above. I'm a fairly new director of 2 years, and we haven't really gone over a lot of our policies with my board, but I do have a twist. I have a question.
Yes.
So my board wants to write a new policy. I don't see the need for it, but they decided they want to do this, and I don't know how that works, if they get to do that or why they want to do it, but they want to write a flag policy. I put a pride flag out in front of the library in June, and now the board wants to. So when I saw this program, I was really excited because I would like to find out. some more.
Yeah, and Jamie might need to talk a little bit more about that, maybe, in a, the question I want you to answer, is, do you have any documentation that says who is responsible for setting policy for your library? Is it the library director and staff, or is that responsibility vested in the board?
Yeah, that's my question too. I don't know.
Right, so we might need to have a side conversation about this. But
Okay, that
more
sounds great.
questions about that. Okay, thanks,
Great,
Jane.
thanks.
Ken. Hello, Ken.
How are you? Good. So I'm the superintendent in Jamestown, and Michelle Stever, who I got on at the very end of what she was saying. So I'm just trying to run around and do a few things. So I was thankful that she had shared this webinar with me to jump on and learn more about policies. I think it's important that we have, policies that are in place that make decisions around instruction and the media that we have in our libraries. Our policy is from 1984. And just like some others were saying, you have some old policies in place. And, in my role, there's a lot of policy work we're doing, but even though every year we say we're going to go back and try to review policies, but there's always something else new that's coming out. So, for example, we're working on a Title IX policy right now, a suicide prevention policy, professional, conduct. So there's all of these other things that end up becoming a priority over some of the other work that we want to do. So I am hoping to learn more about this here. And it's nice to see Lisa from our town library. So maybe the three of us can all work together on what our policies need to be for our town.
That sounds great. Thanks, Ken. Looks like Emily's about to go next.
Sure. So I'm Emily. I'm from the Office of Library and Information Services, our state agency. So I'm here to listen. First of all, fill my cup because I think it's always important to think about policy and making policy. But I'm also here from a perspective of looking to support libraries and how, sort of in my role, I can do anything that I can do to sort of help libraries along in doing this work. So that's why I'm here.
Emily, thanks for being here. Appreciate that. Is there anyone else who is not yet shared why they're here who wants to say hello? If it's the same sort of reasons that you're here, that's great too. If you've got another twist and you want to share that, that's okay. If you're being held captive by your cat, then maybe you can just, Catherine, give us proof of life later when you've gotten home safely. So. All right, I'm mindful that we have limited time and we got a lot to talk about, and so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna start sharing that screen again, and I gotta make y'all a little bit smaller so I can see what I'm doing. All right, so what's on your mind? We've got that, and what were you hoping to learn? All right, so why are policies important? Just a little bit of background work here. So I want to say, I'm going to hold up, if you look at, this is the Intellectual Freedom Manual. It's a resource that is listed later on. And as Kayla mentioned, I was the editor for this edition. Much of the information I'm going to be talking about today is coming directly from here. And if you don't have access to this in your own library, it is something that, especially if you're doing a policy refresh, might not be a bad idea to get a hold of, or at least borrow a copy from another library that has one. And so I just want to talk a little bit about why policies are important, and some reasons to have them if you need to convince folks. It's really important to make sure that you have some stability and continuity in how libraries working, because you can make sure that everyone's on the same page. Also, if you are trying to convince to a board or to government, whoever it is that you are reporting to, that we are, we're not just making up stuff, that we are run like a business, and that it makes what we do more credible because we are basing these things in policy. It's also not just about what we do, but policies represent the values that we are promoting. They really are our principles in practice. And so policies can tell our communities what it is that we are trying to do and what we are trying to become, and why we do the things that we do. It also does work to be an agent for accountability, so that we are trying to show that we are, that it's okay for our public to expect us to do things the right way, and that we are willing to be, that we want to be held accountable because we are partners in our work. It does also, if we can point to our policies when someone is complaining about something that we've done, whether it's something we've purchased or a program that we've had, and they say that we're biased, or they say that we are not, that we're censoring information, and we can go to our policies and point and say, this is actually what our policy says. It is a really, it can help undercut their arguments and make it harder for them to attack us in a successful way. And also is important to have a good baseline for our activity, because if you do get sued for not having, not following policy or not having a policy, you can say, no, but this, but Madam Judge, we do have our policies written down, and this is what we do. So it's a good thing to help in the event of legal action. So 6 key policies from an intellectual freedom standpoint that you want to make sure you have include collection development and resource reconsideration. And as I said, it's going to be the main focus of this. But I want to say that a lot of the same principles that apply to how we are defend the resources that we are selecting for our libraries would also hold true for programs that we put on or for exhibits that we have. So some of these same mechanisms in terms of talking about what it is why we choose to have materials, or why we choose to have a program, or why we choose to do an exhibit, and then how can you handle concerns about those materials, follow a similar pattern. And so we will want to tweak them a little bit, of course, but it's the same sort of principles. So again, that's going to be the main focus. Internet use policy is something you are required to have by law if you receive E-rate or LSTA funding related to internet costs. User behavior and library use, and that's something that connects in with intellectual freedom, because a lot of times there's a question about, well, I've got free speech, I can say what I want or do what I want in the library, it's my First Amendment right. But if those actions begin to impinge on other people's ability to use the library, or in staff members' ability to do their work without getting harassed, then it's crossing over into behavior. And that's where we can begin to address some things that often can be some of the more difficult areas, and they cannot hide behind free speech claims if their behavior is being disrupted. Privacy and confidentiality is also very important, and making sure that they are in line with state law and as well as federal law. Social media, if you are choosing to use social media, if you have social media accounts, policies on how you handle that, because there are some rules that relate to publicly funded institutions and how they use social media, and also meeting rooms and exhibit space. If you make these things available for the public to use, you really need to have policies in this place. And again, there are some special things about that, but a lot of the same principles are really about what's acceptable, what's not, and what can you do if you have a problem. All right, so let's talk a little bit about collection development. What are things that you want to see in a collection development policy? Number one, you want to say, what is the reason? Why do we have this? And set up that review schedule from the start, so that it's not every 20 years or every 10 years, but maybe you want to have a policy review calendar, because this is work that does take time away from other parts of your job. And it's something that you'll want to do on a regular basis, but kind of on a scheduled basis. So it's not, if you're going to review everything this year and get it done, great. It's going to be a big lift. And if you say we're going to do it every 3 years, then 3 years from now, you're going to be exhausted when you have to do this all again. So thinking about a timeline of doing these in reasonable order is something that's important. You also want to be able to say where people can send, ask questions. So that's something that's important so that they know that they've got a mechanism for being involved. You also want to talk about how collections relate to the mission of the library. And so it's something that this is a chance for you to talk about what your idea is. Why do we have collections that we build? Is it to make sure that we have access to the full range of ideas? Do we talk about meeting the needs of the community, the information needs of the community is another example of the way that this could go. And trying to set out some of your principles behind the policy at the start is a good way to inform some of the choices that we'll be making. And you'll also want to specifically call out those principles. And so if you are saying that we are, this represents our commitment to free expression as supported by the First Amendment. A lot of libraries will call out the Library Bill of Rights in various interpretations, or the Freedom to Read statement as the bedrock documents that give you that sense of that where a lot of people have spent a lot of time working on that language, so that it captures those principles in a way so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to talking about what our principles are. You do, in the case of a collection, you want to talk about what the objectives are. What's the purpose? Are we providing, in the case of, say, a school library, we support the curriculum, and we also support the developmental growth of our students, which is a great way to make sure that we have materials in there that support their recreational reading as well as their curricular-based reading. And also talk about the scope of what you do. Because there's no single library that will work for every person. We can't be all things to all people. We all have different roles. And so to talk about the scope of what we can and can't do. So again, in school libraries, here's a sample phrase that talks about meeting the educational needs of the students and the intellectual growth, personal development, individual interests, and recreational needs of students. Because that is a great way to make sure that we can make the argument that we have books that may not otherwise make it, say, into the classroom. And that can be, because there is a distinction between what students have to read in the classroom and what students can choose to read in the library. It's important when you're writing this that you actually talk about who's got the authority to make decisions, and you should refer to them by their role and not their name, because that's a really bad way to date your policies very quickly. And you want to talk about what it is that, what criteria you do use to make selections. And this could be a list of all the potential things you're considering. And they should be relevant to what the library's mission and goals are. But you don't want to require that they all be met, because there are going to be some things that check off some parts of this list, excellence, the authority, suitability, the format, but may not, or a prize, saying we need to get this, like we're going to collect everything that gets a prize, but it doesn't mean that everything you collect has to win a prize. You see what I'm saying? So you want to make sure that you have a broad sense of the criteria that help you make decisions. You also want to talk about what other resources you might be consulting when you're making decisions. And so if you are always buying bestsellers, you should include that in the policy. Reviews are something that are often depended upon to make a choice about a title. And they are often used to then defend that choice later on. But we don't recommend that you require reviews for every item, because that is a way that tends to make it harder to bring in materials that are coming from small presses, from alternative presses, from outside of the mainstream. And so you might be unintentionally excluding materials that are created by communities that have been marginalized, or materials that are from people who are not well represented in kind of standard publishing circles. And so the reviews, while they can be helpful, I would not suggest making it a requirement. And you do want to talk about when you're bringing in controversial topics. I would certainly not try to define what a controversial topic is, because controversy is in the eye of the beholder. But this is why we suggest having language along the lines that talks about why you have things that might be considered controversial or offensive, and that it may be included because it's something that helps expand the diversity of viewpoints on a topic, and makes it able for us to serve all the various parts of our community. Because a lot of times arguments are made that you shouldn't have we don't need materials on this topic because we don't have those people aren't here, or they're not in our community. And that's something you want to be able to push back and say that we need to have the ability to learn about people who you may not think are here, or the viewpoints that you may not think are represented. We need to, yes, represent what's here in the community, and also things that may contradict that, so that you can have a chance to explore the world of ideas. And you also want to, in the collection development policy, make sure that people know what their opportunities are for making requests and what you will do with those requests, so that they know that they are part of the process when it comes to helping to build the collections that they are in fact using. And you also, this is important to think about what you're going to do with gifts, things that are coming in from donations, and make sure that you're following the same rules, that just because someone gives you stuff doesn't mean that you have to take it. And especially if that is coming from someone who sees themselves as an important supporter of the library, you would just want to be clear that these rules apply to everybody, and that they don't get special treatment because maybe they're a donor to the foundation, or they happen to be on the board, or something. That it's the same rules apply to everybody. If you do allow your users to help shape the collection in terms of having on-demand ordering, if they can trigger purchases by looking at records that are loaded in your catalog, or have other on-demand features built into your practices, you want to make sure that you talk about how you will ensure that the collection is still hitting all the notes that you want it to hit, and doesn't just get channeled into, say, the interests of the majority who are involved in those activities. And you also want to talk about what's happening at the other end of the material life cycle. And so what are the criteria that we use to deselect items? If they, what are the reasons why we might remove something? When are we going to invest money in keeping something around by rebinding it? When will we look at updating obsolete formats? And making decisions about that. So you got to think about the life cycle of the materials as well. You also want to talk about how you're going to have the books laid out, and mentioning here that we don't use prejudicial labels. And labels have always been kind of somewhat a tricky thing in our use of them. I know that people want to use labels to make it easier for folks to find stuff, and the American Library Association's position at this point and for some time has been that if you have kind of value neutral labels, things that say like fantasy or romance or YA, young adult, that's one thing. To try to make it easier to find things if you're familiar with Ranganathan's laws of library science, and save the time of the reader, save the time of the user. That's where labels can help, and also why we arrange things also in a way that can be helpful. In a public library, we have a children's section and a YA section and a nonfiction section and an adult section, because we think that that's being helpful for people to find stuff that they're going to be most interested in. So you should talk about what your arrangement policies are. But one thing that we do not recommend is putting labels on books that are based on the content in a way that could scare somebody away. Warning labels, content warnings. That's not something that, again, is not an objective process and could dissuade people from reading or engaging with materials that they actually could find useful. So that's the side of bringing stuff into our collections. And now we need to talk a little bit about the flip side of the collection development policy is the reconsideration policy. And so you notice that I'm not using the word challenges here, because when we talk about resource reconsideration, we feel that this language is more invitational when we are talking to our users, because they do have a right to ask us to reconsider resources. And if we say it's about a challenge, then we're already setting up kind of a dynamic where it's having some headbutting going on. And so that's why we talk about resource reconsideration policies. And so you do want to recognize and acknowledge the right to question decisions that we make. It's part of being in our work. And there are times when we can make mistakes. And so we need to allow for that and acknowledge that that's a possibility. And so you want to talk about what the procedure is and be really detailed about what that process is. Talking about how, what happens if someone comes up to the desk and makes a complaint, or picks up the phone or sends an email, makes a complaint on Facebook, how you're going to handle that and where that goes all the way through. And in the same way that the policies around donated materials applies to everybody, the same procedure applies to the source of the challenge or the request to reconsider. And so it doesn't matter who it is, we need to follow the same policy so that consistency is being used in how we are applying this. And you do want to create a request for reconsideration form that asks them why they don't think the resource does not meet the criteria that you've outlined in your collection development policy, and also what they would like for that to happen. And it's important, we think, that resources should be, that we will be looking at them during the process, in the criteria in the collection development process our policy that we have set up, and that they will remain in place, that we're not going to withdraw them from the collection. I know that depending on remaining in place, it's kind of, you want them to be innocent until proven guilty in some respect. You don't want to just pull stuff and not have them be accessible while a challenge is ongoing. You do want to, if you have a committee as part of your resource reconsideration process, you want to make sure that you are informed about your state's open meeting and public record laws to see how it applies to staff committees related to making decisions. And so I did take a look. I want to be clear, I'm not an attorney, but I did read through the Rhode Island Open Records Act, and they do have some exemptions for the open meeting law. And based on my reading of it, it doesn't sound like this would be an exception. And so if you do have a committee as part of your process, it would be subject to open meeting laws, but I would have you confirm that with whatever legal counsel advises your library, right? Whether it's the school district or the public library, the municipality, and perhaps even, I don't know if the state library might weigh in on that, but you'd want to confirm. But based on my reading, it sounds like this is something that would be subject to open meeting laws. And so you just need to be aware of that as you're conducting it. You also want to, we would also request that you have part of your policy that it's written in there that you report these challenges then to both the public so that they know that these sorts of things are happening, and also to professional organizations, including ALA, so that ALA can track the level of activity that we have around here. We may have seen, earlier in this week, there was a news article in the Washington Post that talked about the record number of challenges that we've seen in the recent time period. And so it's definitely on the public's radar. And then you do want to, once you have made a decision, you want to make sure that you provide a letter that details what the decision was, that also tells them what their appeal processes options are, assuming that they have some. And it's something that you want to make sure that they took the time to file the request for reconsideration, and you want to take the time to have a tailored response and not just have it be a form letter. Okay, so I know that this was a lot on the collection development and selection side, because challenges to books are what we're facing in the same ways, but we can talk a little bit more at the end about how this might apply to programming. How meeting rooms are another side of things, so we'll have to talk a little bit about that. But in terms of policy resources, again, the Intellectual Freedom Manual, it's designed as a guide for policies, and there's a whole section that is talking about what to do. There is actually, it's a chapter called Creating Intellectual Freedom Policies for Your Library, and it includes guidelines for library policies. So there's even a policy about policies, if you will, from the Intellectual Freedom Committee. And then it walks through a lot of what I walked through. There are these policy checklists that are available as part of these guidelines. And when I walk through for the collection developments and the reconsideration policies, this is coming directly from the manual. And so, again, I would encourage you to take a look at this to see to walk you through the review process. And if you were either looking to create or to revise policies in any of these areas, including the meeting rooms and exhibits, that this is a really good resource for that purpose. There is also a selection and reconsideration policy toolkit, specifically talking about collections, that's designed for public school and academic libraries. It is available on the ALA website, and if you, I can also put that link in the chat once I'm done sharing my screen. But it's something that is freely available and can walk you through how to manage your policies. And so it's something that I would encourage you to take a look at. I also want to call out the ALA Office for Intellectual Freedom. They are available to provide advice on policies. Deborah Caldwell-Stone, who is the current director of that office, this is her contact information, and policies is something that she specializes in. She's an attorney by training, and she's worked for the Office for Intellectual Freedom for 20 years and is very, very familiar with the concerns that people have. And she is an expert on advice around policies. And so you can contact her and ask for help with that. So if you're going to be coming back for the second part of this, where we're going to do some hands-on work and we're going to be doing it in person, what we're asking you to do is it's Wednesday, October 12th at 4 p.m. in Cranston in the Central Library's meeting room. And if you're coming back and you don't have a policy in one of these areas, or there's a policy that you don't have it, but I didn't mention that you want to work on, draft one for next time. And if you do have existing policies, review which ones you want to work on, and then talk about going through that revision process using some of this checklist information. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I want to, I'm going to do a couple things here. Just go back to the one policy resource thing. I'm going to put that link in the chat so that if you're on your computer, you can pull that up and have access to that selection policy toolkit. But I want us to take the time that we've got left to see, to talk a little bit more. I know I focused on collections because there's so much stuff. And I know that I just did this huge brain dump on you. I don't know how you're feeling about it, but there's a lot of stuff to digest. I can also make these slides available so that you can go through all of the details. And so while I'm, if you want, trying to figure out the best way to do this, if you want a copy of the slides, you can send me you can send me a message and just send me your email, and then I will add you to the slide so you can look at that way. And while you're thinking about that, I want Catherine to tell us how her cat's doing. And make sure that everything's okay with it.
Yes, he's approximately 3,000 years old. So he's great. But thank you. I appreciate it. And I'm here for the